Still no score for the Liberty. Natasha Howard with the extra effort, but it lands in the hands of the Las Vegas Aces. All 5 starters for this Aces team. Scores in double figures each and every night. That's Asia Wilson, the outside. And then the Aces run again.
This is nothing but that sports talk.
Yeah, the New York Liberty got blown out at the Barclays Center again. As I welcome to this episode, nothing but that sports talk. And while we're on the subject, let me welcome you, the New York Liberty writer for Winsider and that's Rafique Myles, Ehrlich, on the show.
Hey, Rafique, great to talk to you again. How you doing?
Doing all right. It's nice to see you killing it, covering the Liberty at the Barclays Center, doing everything in person, which is obviously, well, when you started covering the Liberty, you couldn't do it in person the way you should. But the past few seasons, you managed to get some coverages of your hand. You even covered the WNBA All-Star Weekend in person for the first time. But well, before we get to that, why don't you get your overall impressions about the New York Liberty in the first half, which includes the losses to the Aces?
Sure. This has been a Liberty team that has not yet been able to take the floor as they were constructed, really, at the beginning of the season, coming into the season. Injuries have been really, really tough for this team. We saw Benaj Delaney for just a few minutes, and she was the lone All-Star last season. And was supposed to carry a huge load for this team. But Sabrina Ionescu and Natasha Howard made huge strides being named to the All-Star team this year. And there have been some secondary pieces that have come along, and Sandy Brandello's system has come along. So they have rebounded after a 1-7 May. Then they were in a playoff position. Now they've got a really tough schedule, and they've got a tough schedule looking ahead too. So it's going to be tricky to make a playoff spot just because there are 5 teams in contention for 3 spots. But when this Liberty team is clicking, they're really dangerous to everybody.
Exactly. You know what? When Ryan Walker came on the show a couple of weeks ago, he talked about how the New York Liberty are unpredictable. Some nights they're going to give it their all and barely lose, or some nights they're going to give it their all and actually win. And other nights they just have a team off night, like what you saw yesterday morning at the Barclays Center around 11 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you got me thinking, well, are Liberty a playoff team, or are they going to be tanking for Caitlin Clark? But so, and then you talked about the Benaj Delaney. She only played about 4 games so far to start the season. But despite that, Sabrina Ionescu is showing you flashes of what she could be as a number 1 overall pick. I mean, she had 2 triple doubles, even had a half-court shot.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen in recent years, especially when it comes to guards, it takes a little bit longer sometimes. Not this year, notwithstanding Ryan Howard really hit the ground running from day one. But we see that right now with Jackie Young, with Kelsey Plum, who were also guards that were selected at number 1 overall, and it takes a few years. Sabrina Ionescu gets injured 2.5 games into her rookie season and spends half of last season, the first half, rehabbing back from that ankle injury. So this is the first time we're seeing her really fully healthy, and it is as advertised, right? That was what she was supposed to be coming out of college, and she's already in her 3rd season, tied with the overall record for triple doubles with 3 with Candace Parker. So it's just the ceiling is we're not there yet, and she hasn't even entered her prime. But Liberty fans have to be happy with this return and just finally getting kind of what they expected when Sabrina Ionescu was drafted number 1 overall back in 2020.
Not to mention the fact that she's literally giving you some flashes of what, again, she gave you some flashes of what she was during her days with Oregon. And well, unfortunately, she's in the top 3 in most in 3-pointers made per game. Only Scott Dickens Smith and Jackie Young. So to say that she's actually improved a lot is an understatement.
Yeah, for sure. And I think something that makes her game incredibly impressive is her range, right? That's something that the NBA side has seen where players just keep extending further and further out. And on the W side, we haven't seen it quite so much. But Sabrina is not the quickest player in the league. She doesn't have the most foot speed, but she's able to get to the rim sometimes because defenders have to respect her at 30 feet out. They have to extend the defense out to her. And now that the Liberty, a big change that they made was that they brought other point guards in, because Sab is not a point guard. She played 2 in college. Last season, Walt Hopkins tried to get her at the 1, but all of that expelled energy in initiating the sets. It very rarely got back to her. And if it did, it was late clock where defenses could sell out to stop her. So now she's coming off of rub screen. She's coming off of all kinds of actions just to get the ball And we've seen her efficiency numbers skyrocket since the beginning of June.
Yeah, Sam, she has improved a bit on the 3-point shooting, and she's known to sometimes she hasn't lived up to what she was during the days of the Seattle Storm, but as of right now, she's shown you what she could do when she actually focuses on it. I mean, she's part of the reason why in the first game with the Las Vegas Aces that they managed to cut it down to like a 9-point game, with like literally 10 minutes left, and she did make some of her 3-point shots, but obviously it's one of those nights where you hope that she can pick up from that, and obviously she hasn't.
I think that game is a really strong indication of it's a microcosm of what the Liberty have dealt with all season long. Because in that first half, they managed just 28 points, which is a season low, I believe, and they give up 52. They're down 24 at half, and then they score a WNBA record 73 points in the second half while hitting 12 of 18 threes. They hit just 3 of 13 in the first half. Yes, they're a team that lives and dies by the three, but it's also just that this lack of consistency. That's kind of what we've seen and what we see on a lot of younger teams, right? Teams that haven't quite hit that championship threshold yet. Is it takes some time to not just get into those close games in the fourth quarter, but to get into those close games, buckle down and win them. And we've seen some examples that they have. Really impressive ones. The last Connecticut win, it was a close game all the way through, and the Liberty put that one away. And that Aces game in Vegas right before the All-Star break was another example where they put up a league record 116 points in regulation. So at their high, they could do that. But then at their low, they were scoring just 73 points a game back in May. And we saw some of those struggles when the shots aren't falling. Young teams, this is what happens. They let their offense dictate their defense. And when the Aces come out hot, it was the other way around yesterday, where their defense then starts, the Aces hit their first 10 shots and 12 of their first 14 or whatever it is. And their defensive struggles, all of a sudden they come down, they've got to hit a home run every time, right? They're trying to build back from a 25-point deficit in the first quarter. They're trying to build back from being down 35 at half. And for a young team, for any team, that could be a struggle, but that's, I think, what we need to see for the Liberty to make a playoff push is to find consistency across 4 quarters on both the offensive and the defensive ends.
Yeah, that is an actual fact. And also, even when they do come back and take leads, they tend to actually choke under pressure. And you saw that in the loss against Atlanta Dream last month in overtime. And then earlier this season where they had that strong comeback against the Seattle Storm in the first meeting, only to lose in overtime. And, well, of course, that one loss to the Indiana Fever. Now, those are prime examples of how the New York Liberty, they struggle to close out games or to stay with their close games because the opposing team ends up getting hot. I mean, they average about like 84 points given up per game.
Yeah, I don't know that I would use the word choke under pressure. I think that that's got a real negative connotation. I think that there are instances that this team does struggle with late game execution, but there are also instances where the game against the Dream that you talked about, they were down by 13 heading into that fourth quarter, right? And then were up by a few late and gave up a game tying 3. And that was just really deflating because you expend so much effort to get to that point. And then in overtime, they just were gassed at that point because they were really going all out to win that game. And their loss to Phoenix right before on the second half of a back-to-back after that really great game against the Aces. And they are in a double-digit hole after the first quarter and end up losing by 3. There are a couple of instances where, again, it's a young team that's kind of finding their footing. It's also a team that is still meshing chemistry-wise. They are just constantly adding and re-adding new pieces back, right? Han Shu hadn't been here since 2019. Marine Johannes comes in a month late or 2 months late. Beck Allen was a month late and then was in and out of the lineup. Now they're hopefully going to be working Jocelyn Willoughby in for the next game or two. Banaj Eleni in another 3 weeks or so. That's the hope. But it's just all season long, there hasn't been continuity. And I know that lots of teams struggle, but not to the extent that Liberty have with just maintaining rosters this year, maintaining the lineup.
Yeah, that's also true. And that's why it's there to let some pieces go when they do add them. And this is just, I'm not gonna lie, they really have a lot of roster reconstruction to do, and not to mention they're being under coach by Cindy Brondello. Well, they're a pretty young team, and like I said earlier in the episode, offensively they could be pretty unpredictable. I mean, we're not going to be right all the time. I mean, there's some games they probably should have lost, but some games they probably should have won. But you know what? It is what it is as we get now with really 1 month left. But just the final prediction: do you see the New York Liberty making the playoffs this year based on what we talked about?
So it's tough because their schedule is very, very difficult. Look at their next two games as they're facing Connecticut and then they're going down to DC. And I know that they've beat both those teams a couple of times, but those are top 4 teams in the league, top 5 teams in the league. And then I think they've got 2 of their final 12 games are against teams under 500. It's just it's a gauntlet that they've got to go through. But this team, I think, has showed already that they do come together under pressure. And when they've got those head-to-heads against teams that are right around them skill-wise, the Liberty are building up and they are getting their depth back. So if there's a game where someone doesn't have it, if you've got Jocelyn back, she can come in. Michaela Onyenwere has been coming on really strong lately. Dee Richards is back and getting more comfortable each game. So they're finally getting healthy. And I think that there's going to be a little bit of a struggle when you're trying to reallocate all those minutes. But once everyone's back on the same page, we're going to see that cohesion that we did when they had that, it was 7-3 stretch in June. So I think that it's going to be tight, but I still have them making the playoffs in that 7 or 8 spot. And I don't think they're a team that anybody's going to want to face, right? They did show the Aces they could win that game. They did show Connecticut a couple of times. Seattle's played them well, but they've played them close. So these are all the top teams they could match up against when come the playoffs. And Chicago's been their toughest out. So they might not want to be in that 8 seed and see Chicago. But remember, it's a best of 3 series this year, and the lower seed gets the deciding game. So if you get a split on the road, then you're coming to the Barclays Center for a win or go home. And that just seems like a position that this team back against the wall would want to face come playoff time.
Wow, and I can't wait to see how it boils down. And not to mention, they do have another game with the Phoenix Mercury, well, 2 more games with the Phoenix Mercury in the schedule, and that's the team they lost to in the playoffs. It seems that they only got it by scenario, not necessarily because they were good, because of the reasons that you just stated. And Diane Taurasi, the Phoenix Mercury, you know how talented she is.
Yeah. It was a tough matchup last week too, right? Because they, like I said, they beat the Aces one night, and then they took a bus from Vegas to Phoenix, and they got there at 4:30 in the morning to play the second half of a back-to-back. And after a deflating first quarter, they were down by 11 at the end of that first quarter. To lose by 3, it was a really impressive showing for a team that was very much gassed at the end of a tough first half and on a West Coast trip. So the schedule has not been their friend so far, for sure. And that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon.
Yeah, it really isn't. But speaking of schedule, now to transition a little bit to you got a chance to cover the All-Star game for the first time in person in the middle of your journalism career while being a writer for Winsider. Why don't you talk about for your impressions about the way the All-Star break is put together?
Yeah, it's interesting. The experience that I had, I understand, is different than a lot of fans that were both there and fans that were trying to watch on TV, because all of that scheduling and programming was just difficult with getting bumped on Saturday to ESPNU. And it's just things that we've talked about before, right? Schedule issues that we've talked about before. On the media side, it wasn't super clean either. For example, I didn't have a seat at the game itself, and they said kind of wander around and find an open spot. They had a very limited number of seats, which is rough. And same thing for the Saturday event. I stood behind all of the seats because there was nothing allocated for all the media. But still, I had a really great time there. It was awesome to just cover in person and just to see the WNBA live event that was set up. I understand that it was smaller than some people might have wanted, but it's important, I think, to contextualize where there wasn't an All-Star game in 2020 in the COVID bubble. And then last year, if you remember, we had the 3-point contest happen at halftime of the game, where we had participants that were like Jonquel Jones, for example, just finished shooting and then doesn't even get to cool down at all. She has to do a 3-point contest and then go right back into the game. So expanding it to a weekend, while there were a lot of flaws, I think, in the execution, it shows that the league is invested in getting larger, and the WNBA live event will hopefully get larger next year too, with more forethought, with more of a blueprint now for what it could look like, having had this year's experience. So I think it's trending in the right direction. Obviously, when we're in the moment, we want it to be there, right? We want it to be perfect. But this league is continuing to get better and to expand. And I think that as fans is something that we could all be excited about.
The crazy thing is, I was on the Spotify agreement with Christina earlier this week, and she talked about the fan engagement. And I was just saying that from what I've seen on the television, and obviously the social medias where you, Tarika, and Christina were there, it looked well put together. I mean, because you had the fan zone, then you had all the after parties with Chance the Rapper performing. Man, not to mention all the events that were happening that Ari was involved in. She's doing a phenomenal job for Highlander, and you doing a phenomenal job covering everything for Winsider from the New York Liberty perspective. See Sabrina win the skills challenge, and Natasha Howard got to put in some work. Sabrina managed to put in 19 points. I mean, what are your overall impressions about Sabrina Ionescu and Natasha Howard's first All-Star game?
Oh, it was Tasha's second time, Sabrina's first. Yeah, no, but it was really just great to see them interact in an environment that was a little bit less competitive, because I think both of them, right? Like you've talked to both of them. They are always super focused. Tosh will tell you all day about how she sets the tone with her defense, right? And she's telling everyone where to be, and that kind of feeds their offense. And Sabrina always has that game face on, and she's just always talking about how her teammates put her in position to succeed. And it's just very much like they are just constantly in the zone. So to see them loosen up a little bit and have some fun, and especially that skills challenge I love, because that's a side of Sabrina that not only fans but also the media don't get to see a lot, is just her just interacting with the next generation and with Nike Nationals, and just cutting loose a little bit. And I think it's a great thing for the league to position their best players in a position, to put them into a position where they can be role models for the next generation. And that's not just Sabrina, that's not just Tosh, but that's seeing Candace, right? That's seeing Sil, and how much Sil and Sue were just walking around together for most of the weekend. And it was just really great to see that dunk, the three, right? The entire, the players made that such a memorable event.
Exactly. That dunk by Sylvia Fowles, that literally showed you women can do a dunk. But I mean, we've seen dunks happen in the All-Star game before, but that one was special because she did it in her final season in the WNBA.
Yeah, I think that the dunk was impressive, but honestly, the three-pointer might have been even more impressive. Sil had only taken one in her career, and she made that too. So maybe she's the best three-point shooter in WNBA history. Who knows? She was holding out on us all this time.
Exactly. Now, to talk about your career with Winsider, like, what are your impressions about how you evolved yourself as a journalist while being able to do all those coverage for the New York Liberty in person, interviewing Mikhail on your way when she won Rookie of the Year, and all the fan engagement events that the New York Liberty done?
Yeah, it's been a great journey for me as a freelance journalist. I started with a site called B-Ball Writers, which unfortunately was a casualty of the pandemic, but that first got me into writing about the W. And then from there, I started writing with Nets Republic and with Winsider and Queen Ballers Club. And just all of the opportunities there helped me get credentialed and helped me just get more familiar with the Liberty as a local beat, because before that, I was writing about the whole league. And then last season for Winsider, I wrote about the Sun. So that was cool to cover something out of market. But now, yeah, it's really, every year I feel like has been just an amazing new experience for me, from covering in the bubble where everything was on Zoom, to last year where it was like 75% on Zoom, to this year where we finally get some in-person interaction. It's been an evolution, and I'm just really grateful for all the writers that I've worked with, and all the editors, especially the editors who clean up my work, and the site managers. And it's just been really great for me. And I just hope that whatever I'm doing in a small piece of this environment is helping to grow the game and tell the stories of some of these phenomenal athletes.
Exactly. Not to mention you've had to get to build network with all those other journalists like Christina Williams with Girls Talk Sports TV, and Jackie Powell, Jeff Bengochetti. Even I got a chance to talk to Jeff Bengochetti in the one game I did get credentialed last year. Of course, you remember that. Jeff Bengochetti, very, he's very talented journalist, and
he's great. He sits next to me at every game, so he's a great guy. We're just constantly throwing stats back and forth at each other. And yeah, like you said, Christina has been such a huge help to me and just kind of getting comfortable in this space and has taught me so much. And I'm just very lucky to have her and everyone from that Clubhouse family over to Spotify Green Room. And we've done some Twitter lives. It's just been really great. And it's made me more comfortable to jump on shows like yours, because trust me, when I was starting, I was not ready to talk on podcasts or anything. And now I do them more frequently than maybe I would still like to, but I still do them because it's just great for just kind of being able to talk about the W. There aren't enough people in my life that I could talk about the W with.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? If you came on the podcast to be as often as Ryan Walker and the Aya girl, who's a diehard Phoenix Mercury fan, you probably get a sense of how hard I go for the New York Liberty. You see the T-shirt I'm wearing?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I've got one of those too. It's a great shirt. Yeah. No, it's just great to see you platform a lot of different fan experiences and media experiences. So I appreciate you in this space, and I see you coming up. I see everything, all the work that you put in. So I appreciate you, Rafique, too.
Without question. Now, to transition a little bit to the New York Yankees while we still have time, I want to get your overall impressions about the New York Yankees start the season, as they are around 61-57, even though they did lose a series in Cincinnati Reds, but we're not going to talk about that. Let's talk about the positives. After that horrendous wild card loss against the Red Sox last year, I wanted to get your thoughts on the way the Yankees have bounced back during the first half of the season going into the All-Star break.
Sure. I mean, it's been a really impressive first half. Obviously, they've come down to earth a little bit the last few weeks, but that's a little bit less scary when you've got a 15-game lead in the division, right? You can afford to split here and there. You can afford to lose a series. I was unfortunately at the game last night where they lost in extras, but this is a team that also their starting pitching is kind of what's carried them through. Yes, Aaron Judge, the big story, but their pitching, they've got a bunch of starters going to the All-Star game. Nestor Cortez has been a revelation. A lot of the reason why that's worked so much is the catcher, Jose Trevino, who was not even on the roster going into spring training, but one of the players that they traded for was out with an injury. So they brought him in, and not only did he make the team, he was the backup catcher, and then he worked his way above Higgy in the rotation in the catcher split platoon. And now he's going to the All-Star game. I think it's just, there are a lot of feel-good stories. And I think that that's when teams are really gelling, is when you get to see the Treviños and the Cortezes and the Clay Holmes, all of those ancillary characters. When you're going to have a team make a real legitimate push, it can't just be the names on the marquee. It's got to be a 25-man roster with everybody stepping up. And I think that that's what this Yankee team through the first half of the season has shown themselves capable of. I'd love to see them add a piece or two at the trade deadline, but I think that for right now, how could you not be happy with how the Yankees have been playing?
Exactly. They lead and come from behind victories. They literally won the World Series, and the World Series hasn't even started yet, as Ryan Walker always said. I mean, come on, 61. I mean, they're 12 games ahead of the American League East, and then they're not. I mean, even if they're going to lose some series here and there, but they can just sit down and relax.
Yeah. I think that they do need the All-Star break to refresh a little bit, and unfortunately, they've got about a quarter of their team going there. So how refreshing is that going to be? You don't really get that much time off, but it is a grind of a season. And what they've shown is that they've got depth, and that's what you really need. They've got to survive some injuries. They've hopefully Severino won't be out too long. It sounds like the reports back on his shoulder were pretty good from the other day. But if they go out, I'm telling you, Luis Castillo impressed me a lot last night, and I know that that's someone who's on their radar from the Reds. So seeing him in person, he didn't give up a hit until the 5th or 6th inning. And seeing him perform in Yankee Stadium, I think is a good thing too, right? Because sometimes these pitchers come in and they just can't kind of make it in New York. So to see Castillo come in and throw 7 innings of one run ball against the Yankees, that's really impressive for a guy that we already know is someone who's on their short list for possible pickups at the trade deadline.
And this is a Yankee team that's playing in a division where literally everybody has a winning record, or at least at 500. I mean, especially the way that Baltimore Orioles came up. They on a 10-game losing streak. I'm not joking. Baltimore.
10-game winning streak. Yeah, 10-game winning streak. Yeah.
I mean, Seriously, I mean, and we all know how good the Rays and Red Sox are going to be, and of course the Toronto Blue Jays. Too bad only 4 teams in that same division can make it because you got the 3 wildcard spots, and of course the Yankees win the division. So, thoughts on the division?
I mean, it's a great story in Baltimore. I don't think that team is there yet. I don't think that they're a team that's positioned to win right now, but that they are playing so well. It's just really fun. It's just a fan base that has not really gotten to enjoy a team in close to a decade, right? So they've kind of been at the bottom of the division. Toronto's been disappointing. They were the favorites to win the division coming in this year, and they just fired their manager. So I don't know. I feel like I still think that it is the strongest division in baseball. So it would not surprise me at all if all 3 of the wildcard teams, hopefully behind the Yankees, come from that division. But at the same time, with this unbalanced schedule still existing for the last time this year, they are all going to have to beat each other up, and that could knock somebody out. But they're all really talented teams, and it's nobody that you want to see in a playoff series for sure.
Yeah, without question. And to wrap up the show, do you think this is the year the Yankees win the World Series, or at least reach the World Series?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to be strong in my convictions, and I know that the Dodgers are putting together a super team and somehow still have a whole bunch of prospects. But I'm not scared of them. No, give me the Yankees in the 7-game series. That pitching staff, especially if they could pick up another arm at the deadline. Garrett Cole in the postseason is just phenomenal. Aaron Judge still has something to prove. Best way to keep him around is to go win that World Series and then give him a big contract, because he's definitely earned it. So yeah, Yankees World Series. Let's do it.
Let's go. Unless you run into my New York Mets. And now wrap up this episode, Nothing But That Sports Talk. Thank you for stopping by, Myles Ehrlich, and I can't wait to see what you do for the New York Liberty, the WNBA. And to all the ballers out there, get your head in the game.
Thanks so much, Rafique.